Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of About Abroad, where it's my job to introduce you to people who have built amazing lives for themselves in various foreign corners of the globe. We're talking with expats and thought leaders about moving abroad, remote work, visas, and all the fun and practical knowledge that you need to know to follow in their footsteps. If you've ever dreamed of making a life for yourself overseas, maybe working remotely or embracing long-term travel, retiring or studying abroad, or even just taking a peek inside life beyond your borders, you've landed in the right place. Today's episode is a little different than normal. This is a segment within About Abroad that we call About Abroad Happy Hours, which is really just an informal way for me to go hang out with other expats in real life and sit down, have a coffee, have a beer, maybe a glass of wine, and chat about the stuff that we love to talk about on this show. Expat life, traveling, living abroad, all the fun stuff that comes along with that, just like normal, but the audio will probably not be nearly as good as normal when I'm in a studio. So bear with us as we try to take advantage of just some time together in real life, not over Zoom, and hanging out in person with good friends, good people that have amazing stories to tell. So today you will be introduced to my friend Bree, who has figured out how to travel the world without utilizing any tech skills, sitting at a laptop all day, none of that. She works with people and she gets to see the world, and she's done a lot of amazing things. So if that sounds interesting to you, you're going to love this first edition of About Abroad Happy Hours. Cheers and enjoy. All right, Bree, welcome to About Abroad.
Thanks, Chase. Nice to be here.
It's especially nice for me because you are the first guest that I've had on the show to actually bring me a beer for the show, which is really amazing.
I could imagine that would have made your afternoon.
The Aussie hospitality, we call it Southern hospitality where I'm from. I don't know if you guys have that sort of thing going on in Australia, but this is quite hospitable.
I am a very hospitable person. No, I'm not quite sure if we have a term, we coin a term like that in Australia. But in Australia, you'd be my mate, so I just brought a beer for a mate to have a chat.
Well, cheers, mate.
Cheers.
Well, I'm really excited to have you here today. We're good friends here in Valencia, and we always have a great time when we get together. Mm-hmm. And what's interesting, though, is like you have so many little aspects of your background that I find super intriguing. And I think people that listen to the show would find intriguing, but I don't know a lot of details. So I'm hoping that we can dig into those today.
We can.
Nice. So, okay, first of all, I want to start with you're obviously you're Australian. You're living here in Spain. And I think that's, in a funny way, sort of the almost the boring part of the Odyssey of Bree is because we're both living here, so it's like I think we're on the same visa, right? You're on the non-lucrative visa, same as me, so that's good to know right off the bat. That visa applies to Aussies as well. Mm-hmm. But I think what's even more interesting is to like go back a little bit, and I'll kind of let you start where you want to start. But you have lived in like a million different places. And so just off the top of your head, can you rattle them off? Like where have you called home, quote unquote?
So obviously Australia, and I was there until just a couple of years after high school. And then I always had kind of the travel bug and wanted to just see the world. So I then did some backpacking and traveling with some friends, moved to the UK, called London home for a couple of years. My visa ran out there, so I had friends that were still living in the UK, wanted to go traveling in Europe with them, so I moved to Dublin for some time, and then Buenos Aires for some time too, to study Spanish, but I didn't do a very good job of that.
It's a tough place to learn Spanish too.
Well, yeah, actually, I really like the Argentinian accent, but I was quite young, and the glitz and glamour of the Buenos Aires, the city, just enticed me a little bit too much. And then to study, that is. And then I moved back to London after moving to Qatar, and I lived in Qatar in the Middle East for 4 years. And then
we'll come back to that for sure.
Off and on, I moved. I had a job that took me to Saudi Arabia, so I lived in Saudi Arabia for a while, and then and then I moved to Valencia, Spain. So it's a bit of a colourful journey, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, that gets back to why I believe Valencia is the boring part, because that's quite a list of places, and a lot of people have maybe traveled to some of those places, but to call all of them home in the last handful of years is a pretty amazing thing. So of all those places, do any of them stand out as like places where you would potentially move back when you consider all the different factors? Or are you happy here?
No, not one of them, in fact.
Including Australia?
Australia, I can't rule out.
It's hard to rule out home.
It's always home, right? Your family's there. There's many, many things that I do miss. And the older I get, I do feel that I'm missing more of those things. But all of the others, I had a good time and I have great memories, but I don't aspire to move back to any of them. When I lived in London, I loved London. I would have tried anything to be able to have stayed there legally and have been able to stay on somehow. But I went back a few years ago for a holiday and I realized it just wasn't my place anymore. And I suppose that's what the beauty of getting older is, right? We change our ways and we look at things differently. So Valencia is a good place to live, gives me a good balance. I'm happy here. Yeah,
that's a really interesting thing. Like a place can be everything to you in that moment, right? And it's like, oh, this is perfect for me at 24 or whatever, exactly. But then you figure out a different pace of life for the next chapter, and that's always, I think that's a fun part of like the moving around and living in different places kind of journey, is you figure that out as you go.
100%, and I think that's a really interesting thing as well to keep in mind when you do travel or do decide to live in other countries, because it doesn't always have to just be that one and only place. You can, keep moving and keep trying and keep meeting different people, and it's all the adventure of it. Right?
Yeah, that's super fun. So most of the time you were moving to these, you mentioned like a couple of them, like Qatar was 4 years, London was roughly
2.5, 3 years.
So these are significant periods of time. It's not like you're there for 3 months on a tourist visa and then hopping out and going to the next place. You weren't like digital nomading.
No, the only place that was probably, Buenos Aires, I stayed for 4 months, and Dublin, I think maybe 5 months.
Okay.
So they were shorter periods of time, but everywhere else was like, a couple of years or more.
What a fun life to consider. 5 months in Dublin, a short period of time, right? Many people listening are envious, I'm sure. So that's okay. So let's go back real quick. I really want to spend some time on the Middle East. I think that's super interesting because, just frankly, a lot of people from the Americas, Europe, Australia, that's not, they're excited to come do some of the other places that you went to, and you went and lived in some different places. So I imagine some people are really interested in hearing that. I want to come back to that. With what you mentioned about London is really interesting because you said if you could stay there legally. So you were there for 2.5 years, which is a pretty good amount of time. Can you tell us a little bit about how you were able to stay that long and what that process was like, and then ultimately why that couldn't continue?
So I have an Australian passport. Unfortunately, I don't have the luck of any ancestors that have brought me the luck of the golden ticket of the European passport. And at the time, before, this was very long time before Brexit kind of was anything. So I was able to, before Brexit was anything, and the UK was still, EU, and everything would have been easier if I had an EU passport. However, the UK extends a working holiday visa to Australians, and I'm sure, there's a lot of these kind of working holiday schemes or different visas that people can investigate into to be able to live have these kind of adventures.
Yep.
So I had a working holiday visa, which was for 2 years at the time. And then I went back there at one stage. I was studying online, and I went back and stayed in London for about another 8 months or something and just studied online. So the working holiday visa, enabled me to go to London and live and work. And unfortunately, once that was over, I didn't have a lot of options to be able to continue in the UK, so I had to move on at the time.
Why does it come to an end? Like, is there a max time period, or?
Yeah, so it's a 2-year visa. You
Okay.
get given a 2-year visa. I don't know what the current restrictions on that visa are. This was maybe over 15 years ago.
Was it really that long ago? You
So-
strike me as so young. I had no idea.
No one can tell, hopefully, over the microphone how
There's a
how
massive
old I am
following
here.
of About Abroad. Everybody now knows.
But yes, I moved away from Australia about 15 years ago, and the UK was the first country
first
that I
stop.
went to. So I was 20, more or less, just a little bit over 20 at the time. And well, it might even be longer than 15 years. My math isn't so good with working all that
We're
out.
not testing you,
yeah?
don't worry. Yeah, your visa doesn't require this. So.
I'm trying to somehow keep my age a secret, but I think what
cat's out of the bag now.
what I've just said there is going to lead people to understanding how old I am. So I went to the UK. It was a 2-year visa, and there was not a lot of options to be able to extend that at the time. So I had friends that had moved to the UK after me, and we had made plans to travel through Europe, and my UK visa finished, so I applied for a very similar scheme in Dublin or in Ireland, and moved to Dublin for 5 or 6 months while I was waiting for that trip that my friends and I had planned throughout Europe, saved some more money, and then we did like a 2-month Europe trip. So
what'd you do for work in
Ireland and
in London and Dublin? Were you were you in career mode, or were you odd jobs, or what?
It was more or less odd jobs. I didn't know really anyone when I moved to London. I moved there with a friend of mine, or a few friends of mine, and we all kind of ended up finding a job with a real estate company called Foxtons.
Okay.
And we worked as their office, like a managers kind of thing, like a office administration manager, looking after the office, and then a few executive assistant roles with different companies. And the same thing when I moved to Dublin, I got the same kind of work.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. So that was on that visa. That was pretty straightforward. That wasn't like a big.
Yeah, I mean,
like you didn't have to jump through hoops to
No.
do this kind of work.
No. There was a lot of opportunities at the time to be able to get anything really that you wanted to. I think.
And to work legally. Yeah. Wow.
Exactly.
Great. Okay. That's really interesting. So I think that's something that people can look into as an easy way, because a lot of times with these visas, you can arrive to a place, you can stay, but you can't work.
Right.
And
exactly.
it becomes very difficult if you don't have remote work or something. So, okay, cool. And how about in Buenos Aires? Like, just real quick, was it easy to stay for a long period? You mentioned 4 months?
4 or 5 months. I think I don't remember it ever being a problem. It was kind of either in between that London-Dublin stint or maybe just after it. And 4 or 5 months, I just had been there traveling at the start before I moved to London, and I really loved it. And I made some friends while I was there, and then I went back again, and I thought, I really love this city and I want to learn Spanish. I really thought it was going to be easy to learn a language. I thought, I just go and I'll just do a little bit of study and
osmosis, I'll just absorb it. It'll be great.
I really did, I have this thing that when I was like 18, I used to go to the gym, and if it was really busy, this is really showing how silly I could be, but I'll tell the world about it. So I used to go to the gym, and if it was really busy, I was like, I packed my bag and I came. So I've been to the gym, it'll give me some kind of magical effect. And anyway, so I seem
it's like I buy the book and I don't even have to read it.
Just put it under my pillow and go to sleep, and it should just absorb
in
into my brain. So I feel that was kind of my idea about learning a language. So I went there and did a little bit of partying and went out to nice restaurants and made some lovely friends. Walked around the city and had a lovely time absorbing the culture of Argentina, and thought that would just miraculously have me learning Spanish, basically. I did attend some classes, but I did walk away from that experience having not learnt much Spanish. So yes, that was 4 or 5 months. I can't remember it being an issue. I just think I must have gone on a tourist visa.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Pretty standard.
Pretty standard.
Really nice. Did you sort of going in a totally different direction, but you obviously had a craving to travel and to go explore, and Australians have a very strong stereotype reputation for doing that. I mean, you guys are all over the world and you travel a lot, but this is more extensive than going on a 1-month holiday or something like that. Were you eager to get out of Australia and just to see other parts of the world, or was there some reason that you wanted to leave? Was it sort of the push-pull factor? Which one was more important in this way?
I think I'm very curious by nature, and so I was always just really interested in learning a lot about different cultures. My parents were great at bringing us up trying different foods. My mum she's a great cook, and she used to cook a lot of different foods at home. I think Australia is a very multicultural country anyway. You're completely right. You hit the nail on the head. We are really curious to travel, and I think that stems from it is a country so far away. So if you go on any kind of trip, it has to at least be 2 or 3 weeks, because basically to experience any kind of different culture, different cuisine, different language, you're a minimum of 8 to 9 hours before you experience that by flight. So when I lived in London, I'd leave my desk on a Friday afternoon and get to the airport by the tube, and then have gotten to another country and been at the dinner table in that other country, experiencing exactly that, the different language, the different culture, and the different food within 3 hours, from door to door. And that to me just blew my mind. I just found it fascinating. I thought that was amazing. But yeah, my parents probably is what sparked the most of it. We always used to talk about different places, and I was just really curious to travel, and I didn't ever expect that it would last this long. I never left Australia with the plan that it would be so long, 15 or more years. One thing kept taking me to another, basically.
Yeah. We share that. I think not just you and I, but Americans and Australians, we also it's very hard for me I have to drive about 15 hours before I hear a slightly different accent,
right?
And catch a plane and fly across the country to maybe get some different type of food. It's just very similar. So when you get to a place like Europe, or even in Central or South America, or somewhere where you can cross borders and get distinctly different, not just accents, but languages, cultures, foods, traditions, all these things, it's mind-blowing and very addicting.
It is, exactly. Completely addictive and fascinating, isn't it? It's just really, that's probably just what kept driving me. This year has been especially an interesting year.
Yeah.
To not enable us to be able to live that life, unfortunately. However, I still do feel that curiosity and that excitement when I do get I'm lucky enough to be able to travel and experience that in a different country. It hasn't gone away, and if it ever does, then maybe that's the time to go home, but I don't see that it will.
I always said I wanted to be in a place long enough because my wife and I, Allison, were bouncing around a lot, traveling a lot, but we were kind of visa hopping, and I said I wanted to get to a place where I would be there long enough to get bored. And
exactly.
COVID and coronavirus, this finally forced us into that place where I'm sometimes I'm here in Valencia and I'm God, I would really miss traveling. I'm ready to go somewhere else, not permanently. I really like living here, but I'm so eager to experience something new again. And yeah, it does get addicting.
Right.
So, okay, coming back to, the really one of the really interesting things about your story is at some point you become a flight attendant, and this opens up a lot of doors, if I understand correctly.
Right.
So let's just very generally speaking, tell us about the flight attendant, kind of what that means, because flight attendant can mean a lot of different things on airlines or private jets or whatever. So how it came about, and how that journey began.
Okay, so I had worked in aviation after school in Australia. When I left school, I started working, in aviation on the ground, and it was always something that I wanted to do. I wanted to try my luck at being a flight attendant. I suppose it goes hand in hand for me. I thought, why not do a job that somehow I get paid to be able to go and do what I am paying my own money to do, you know. I'm curious, and I think that the job would suit me. I'm a people person. So yeah, I worked in aviation for a few years after I left school, and then I moved to London, and it wasn't really as easy to get a job in aviation when I moved to London. So followed what I said before about those few, you know, I was an executive assistant for some different companies and did some temp work. And then I went back to Australia actually just for a brief stint, maybe like a year and a half, to study. And I studied a Bachelor of Business in Communications and Events, thinking that I would follow that. But then I just missed the world and I wanted to travel again. So while I was studying, a friend of mine was working for Emirates, and she said to me, why don't you apply to fly? You've always wanted to do it. You've worked in aviation before and you can keep studying. So I took it online and I got a job with Qatar Airways, and I worked with them for 4 years. And I loved it, and I finished my degree while I was there. But I just loved it. I couldn't think of going back to a desk life.
Yeah.
And I wanted to keep traveling in some way. I wanted to keep seeing the world. And at that time, I mean, digital nomad was kind of a newer thing, and I didn't really explore it enough at the time to know, like, maybe I could.
It didn't really seem like other options. Like,
No,
there weren't like a
wasn't
ton of
lot
options. Yeah.
At the time
That
to
wasn't
be
that
able-
long. That was very
No,
recent. Like, that was
exactly.
just like a digital
In the
nomad is
last
like, what
10
is
years,
that?
more
Yeah.
or less, right? And
Yep.
I mean, even then, in the last 5 years, maybe it's
Yeah.
become more popular in those first 5 years.
So this was really like the cream of the crop job where you're like,
For me
I
at
get
the
to
time-
travel around the world.
Exactly.
I get to use my natural skills, and not only that, live in a foreign country as well.
100%. Yeah. So that's just what took me into it. Yeah, I worked commercially for 4 years. And then I had some friends that transitioned to the corporate side of things, which is private jets. And it's a very kind of, I suppose, exclusive looking world from the outside.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Rich dudes.
Right.
And dudettes.
Right.
Rich dudes and
Rich
dudettes.
dudes and dudettes. We'll go with that one. I like that. So at the time, it was very alluring. I now know much, much better. It's very different.
How do you compare and contrast the two, like commercial versus?
Commercial versus-
We'll come back to where you're going, but just curious since you touch on that.
So commercial was 4 years, and then corporate's been something like 6 or 7 years. And it's just really different because I can use a lot of the skills that I have, like, even studied, for instance. It's almost like running an event, which is what I studied, but just on a plane. You know, I get to manage everything myself. I don't work, well, other than pilots, I don't normally work with a team. So there's a lot of things. It's very challenging. There's a lot of things to organize.
Sort of like a event planner in the air, and
Correct.
you're taking care of everything for that particular flight.
Right, exactly. So yeah, I find that very challenging, and for that reason, it is quite different to commercial, where you get on and everything's done for you. Commercial, I'd miss commercial for the fact that when I left the plane, I didn't have any work to do, whereas corporate's very different than that. You've got a lot of things to plan before, a lot of things to tie up afterwards, things that keep you on your toes all the time, a lot of things that you have to think about. So
Would you say the hours are more or less similar? Hours and pay? Like, is one more lucrative than the other, or more time intensive than the other?
corporate, I feel it's not as regulated perhaps as commercial can be. So there definitely is out there a huge pay scale difference in pay scale. But if you get in with the right company or the right private family, it can be a lot more lucrative than commercial. And really that is because of the things I just explained. It's a lot more responsibility. Yeah, there's a lot more to your day-to-day tasks and to everything that you need to have arranged in advance, and all the things that you need to have organized. So there's a big scale there. It can go from one end to the other. And again, that's that very elusive world that looks very fancy, but it really is about, it's a networking thing, and it's one thing that I've really enjoyed about connecting with you and the group that we normally spend time with is that all of us have something to do with aviation. I mean, your dad's in corporate aviation. It's been a total by coincidence that we found all these things out about one another. And so the world, you know the world, I know the world. It's very interesting, and it's unlike a lot of other worlds, but it is all about networking and who you know. So.
Yeah, I always say, I think it's funny, like I was born to a pilot and a flight attendant, so I was pretty sure I was just like destined to have to travel a lot. Like there was no way around it.
It's in your blood.
Yeah, it is super cool. Yeah, so and so there's kind of 3 tiers, right? There's commercial, there's corporate, and private.
Is private and corporate, kind of the same? More or less, I would put in the same basket. It's just a private jet, a corporate jet, same, and they all fly into a private airport, the corporate side of things, and obviously you have different. The only real difference I would say there is that you have corporate companies, the likes of big brands, I suppose, like maybe Sony or car companies, I don't know, maybe Apple, Amazon. They would have their own fleet of private jets, and that would be the corporate side. And then a private side maybe more so would be like a private family that owns their own jets. Yep. So really it's all within the corporate aviation.
I can imagine for like so many people that are listening, this is like a whole new world to them. Like this world exists. You think, I mean, people have planes, but like to think about like, there's jobs out there where some of us can find work on a private jet for a pop star. Is like, that really exists? Like I read about it in a fairy tale, but that really exists.
I mean, there is plenty of jobs out there that it just blows my mind, the kind of job descriptions that some people have. And I obviously it wasn't something I always knew that existed either, but I had some friends that went into it, and then the more and more that I started to investigate it, it was something that I thought would really suit my personality. And it is a pretty crazy job. And when I meet people and people ask me what I do, I always do get like but what kind of is that? And people are very confused initially. It is. It's great, and I could talk about it forever, just like travel, because it is something that I really love. I'm very passionate about it. I can't wait to get back to the world of flying. Hopefully one day, post-COVID.
Hopefully soon.
Yeah. Exactly.
And okay, so one point to clarify on that real quick is if somebody wants to get a job in that world, you don't just like knock on the pop star's door. They're run by...
I wish. That'd be great. Anyone knows anyone, give me a shout. Just email Chase.
I mean, there's normally managed by third parties, right? So like, what does someone do if, like what did you do, or what would you do now if you were somebody that was like, I want to follow in Bree's footsteps. I want to be in corporate aviation and live this super glamorous lifestyle. Right. What does somebody do? Like, how do you even break into that world?
So it differs for different people. Some people have followed the commercial aviation route first, and then they've transitioned into corporate. Some people maybe have worked in hospitality, and when I say that, normally it's probably more so 5-star hotels, the likes of Ritz-Carlton and Four Seasons. They've had really a high hospitality training to be able to then somehow meet somebody that's maybe put them forward for a position. There is a lot of different ways that you hear of people getting the job, but I would say I'm actually kind of maybe brainstorming at the moment about working on some small project. So in the time that maybe that happens and I can give more information about this, I'll somehow pass that on to you, and maybe you can update your show
notes,
links or notes, exactly, and someone can have a look at that. But there is quite a lot of groups, and this is growing more so the more we go digital and have online presence. And there's a lot of Instagram accounts that you could follow that give different tips. One in particular that I would, and I'm sure I don't know her personally, but she has a large online presence, and I have a bit of a corporate flight attendant crush on her. Yeah. She's to put it in that way. But she seems really great. I think her name's Jamie, and she goes by the tagline of Flightess. So she'd be a good one to follow. And she kind of I think she has a blog and she has a website and definitely an Instagram account that I follow, and gives a lot of tips of different tricks and tips
that's
to be
really
able
useful.
to follow that route if you so wish to. And then also, I suppose she probably would tag in a lot of different companies and people that you could have like a bit of a stalking day of figuring it all out.
Yeah. You could weave
Piece
that
it all
web.
together.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Do some digital stalking.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. That's really interesting. So backing up a little bit. So you get this job. The first one's with Qatar. Mm-hmm. Is that in Qatar? Is that where you go? So you got the job from Australia, but they moved you to Qatar, or?
Actually, at the time I was living in London because I had taken my studies online, and I had moved back to London for a little while, and I wasn't able to work legally in London. So at that stage, the friend of mine was working at Emirates, and she said to me, apply for Qatar. So apply for any of the Middle East airlines. They're always looking for people. So
Any reason the Middle East airlines in particular, or just?
At the time, I can't say now because we are going through this strange time. At the time, it was just very popular. The Middle East airlines would hire people from all over the world, and it was very possible to be able to get a job quite easily at that time. Well, quite easily. Yeah.
Relatively. Yeah.
Relatively easily. If you had the right
credentials and experience and all that. Yeah.
So I I made an application online, and I was called to go for an interview in London at a hotel. It was, I think, like a 3-day interview or something. There was different sessions that you had to attend, and after the first session, people were eliminated, and then you were called back again. And I was lucky enough to succeed those interviews, and then they flew me to Qatar, and they provided at the time company accommodation and a package and put you through training. And then, almost 4 years later, I decided that I wanted to take a break, and I went back to Australia for some time. I just had been away from Australia at that time, maybe 8 or 9 years, and I think I went back for 6 or 8 months before transitioning into corporate.
Wow. What was your time like in Qatar, if you have to sum it up? Like, did you have a desire to travel the Middle East before, or was it sort of off the radar, but like, hey, this sounds like an adventure, I'll go for it? I
think it was the latter.
Yeah.
To be honest, I didn't have a huge interest to travel the Middle East, or it was just never, it wasn't on my radar.
Yeah.
Maybe more so, and this is a sticky situation after living there, the Middle East can be, it depends on who you're speaking to,
sure.
But it can be clarified as different regions. But let's just say in a broad way of speaking.
Yeah, painting very broad strokes here.
So I didn't really have any interest to really go to the United Arab Emirates or Qatar or Saudi, basically the places that I ended up living. More so maybe Jordan and Israel and Lebanon, like these kind of places, yes. At the time, I still kick myself that I didn't. Syria, I really would love to have gone to. I love markets and bazaars and stuff like that. So I would have loved to have gone to the Damascus bazaar. So, it wasn't that particular region. No, it wasn't really of interest to me.
But the opportunity came, and you said, "Yeah, I'm going to take it."
I thought, why not? I can continue my studies, and let's just see how this goes. This enables me to be able to fly. I've always wanted to fly. Let's just go with it. And
did you move there alone?
I did. Yeah, you don't have an option when they moved you there at the time as a flight attendant to go with a family. If you apply as a pilot, and this may change in the future. This was maybe the days that may have gone. But if you apply as a pilot and you're successful to any of those Middle East airlines, they'll give you a family package, and you could move there with your family if you so choose to.
But you had you went alone, and what were the first couple months? I mean, do you recall, like, was there anything? I imagine there was some culture shock, or was it just exhilarating and you enjoyed it, or what was the?
I think it was just so new, and it wasn't completely a lonely experience, because as soon as I had met a girl at the interview. She was Spanish, actually, and she had been living in London, and we flew out together. We were put on the same flight, and we were in the same training, and we got put in the same building. So
cool.
I kind of already had someone that I could talk to. And then they put you in a group of, I think we were like 20 girls, ranging from, say, 21 to 33 or 34 at the time. And from everywhere, you know, it was a really multicultural group. I think there was 2 Australians, a Portuguese, some Spanish girls, Chinese, Thai, South Americans.
Oh, you were seeing the world in one city.
Just in that one room that we were training
That's
in,
amazing.
you know, and a lot of us were put in the same accommodation. So we were able to go to training training every day together. And then also come home and, you know, like make a meal together and stuff. So you were distracted and it was busy all the time. And then you started flying and things were busy and you'd start to go to different destinations and that was exciting. And then you'd come back to Qatar and you'd meet your friends. I don't know. It was kind of like, okay, in Australia, university, going to college, for instance, I'm doing inverted commas here. College is very different. When you go to university in Australia, it's not like what I see in the movies in the US. I don't actually know if that's what exists, but I think it is.
It's probably not too far off the truth, yeah.
So we don't have that kind of thing where, you know, you go and you're all like a big family and you have your, what are those things called? Alpha, beta, what are those things
like
called?
fraternities and sororities.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We don't have that kind of thing where you go to university and, you know, all those people are your friends and it's a constant, what looks to me like a constant party. But this probably...
I was very professional in my studies, I'll have you know.
I'm sure you were, Chase. So I would say this was kind of like the closest kind of living to that I would have experienced in my life. You know, we were all, always around different girls and great fun. And then you meet different people from different countries on the plane. And then you're in a different country for a layover. And I just have great memories of it.
Super fun.
Middle East in general, Qatar was restricting. Obviously, I was a young female that had moved to a Middle Eastern, a Muslim country. So there was definitely cultural changes for me.
Like, did you have to wear a hijab?
I didn't have to wear that. That will come later because I did when I moved to Saudi.
We'll get there,
Australia,
folks. Don't worry.
Australia is a lot more... Qatar is actually quite... Well, at the time was still more liberal than Saudi. And so... I don't know, little things like as an Australian female and I was always just brought up to, and I've changed over the years. I think my experiences have softened me a little bit to realize that I have to not always have so much fire in my belly and I can't always stand up for myself. But I was taught that and I was brought up that way. So that was a very difficult thing to see that you moved to a country that you weren't... your opinion or your rights weren't always considered to be... Your rights weren't always considered.
Just stop there.
Stop, right? So that was difficult for me. And I did have some troubles to start with. And people don't necessarily always speak to you politely in the right ways. I don't want to paint Qatar to not be a nice place because there was, like I said, I only have good memories. But yeah, definitely there are those things that exist that you do come up against some brick walls and it sometimes can be very, very frustrating. And then also, obviously, you need to be very conscious. I met a guy while I was in Qatar and I had a serious relationship and we weren't, for instance, allowed to walk along the street holding hands or we couldn't kiss in the street. And
really?
Sometimes we'd slip up. So, there was a few times where we would literally be approached from a passerby and told, like, stop touching, stop. So this... Was
he a local or also an expat?
He was also an expat, and worked for the airline.
Yeah, so that's really difficult because it's totally not within your cultural norm.
Exactly.
You want to hold hands or something.
So natural for us that's what we would do. And we weren't able to do that. And it was really hard to... obviously you want to respect the people around you, but at the time, you know, to have somebody come up literally like just a
passerby, not a police officer or something,
and tell you, you know, you're offending me by doing that. It's a real shock.
Yeah. And then to fight down that fire in your belly, like you said, to not say something back, like, this is my right. Who are you to say, you know? Yeah, that would be very challenging.
And they're not like the worst things really that happened. I mean, those you can understand. You move to a Muslim country, they're cultural things. It was more so female rights, and even while we were in the training college itself in Qatar Airways, you know, there were some things that, I don't know, just little silly things that would get told to me. And I'm like, it was just so against my upbringing, and it was so hard to not stick up for people around me or stick up for myself. But like I said, I only have good memories.
Yeah. You went to college fraternity parties in Qatar.
Exactly.
Most people can't say that.
The only thing is, too, we weren't allowed to drink at home.
I wanted to ask that. So what were the rules around alcohol?
So Qatar Airways has a little bit of a reputation for having very strict rules. So I don't know if these rules still exist to this day. This was, say, 10 years ago that I started there, and I lasted for 4 years, so up until, say, 6 years ago. And so we had a curfew. We had to be home at 3 o'clock in the morning, and we weren't allowed to leave again until 7 in the morning.
Wow.
We weren't allowed to drink at home.
Who enforced these things?
The company.
The company. So there's like company.
We had proper rules.
Yeah.
And you weren't. That we had a security guard in our building. So, and we had a swipe pass to swipe in the door, so they could record you if you came in after those hours, and that was a fireable offense.
And what about the local police or something? Would there be similar, like, actual legal rules that are similar, or would this is just company rules? Those
were company rules. The companies were left to enforce those rules. I'm trying to think of, like, I mean, just like I said, like cultural things you could have gotten in trouble for if you were, like kissing or affection in public or plenty of other things. Maybe that would have the police, but no, these were company rules and things. So there was that. We weren't allowed to use our mobile phone in uniform. That was also could be a fireable offense.
Wow.
But that provided really good standards, and I really appreciate that as a training, because I think that sometimes these days we are a bit too relaxed with those things, and I found that sometimes that could be a really good thing. We also had really strict grooming standards, but that could also be a good thing. It is a hospitality industry, and I found that training also very valuable.
Yep.
And we weren't allowed to have males in our building after 10 o'clock at night. And we weren't allowed to go and stay anywhere else. So you had to, if you were in Qatar, you had to stay in your building.
So you had to check in every night. You had to basically swipe in.
Right. And you couldn't really, I think you could have asked for permission to stay somewhere else, but it wasn't something that was given very easily. Maybe if you had family that lived in Qatar, they might have let you go and stay.
Fairly strict standards to live under for 4, I mean, when you think,
especially when you come from somewhere, like I was living on my own before. It wasn't like I came from living in my parents' house or,
What was your mood like towards this, this piece of your career? Our lives at any given moment are kind of like comprised of like where we live, who we're surrounded by, our work is a big one, what were our hobbies and stuff like that. So at this moment, you're living in a foreign country, you're working as a flight attendant, you're kind of held down by some of these rules. How is your overall mood? Are you like, well, I'll stop there. I won't give you any like leading questions, but I'm curious about what you're thinking about life in this moment.
I must say, at the time, if anyone that knows me at that time listens to this, they'll be like, "You complained all the time." I was a cantankerous person at the time. No, I didn't necessarily deal with it always well. But when I first initially moved there, I was, as I said before, I was studying online, and these rules gave me a really good structure at the time. So I would go on my flights.
Maybe something you kind of needed a little bit.
I did. I needed that because it was kind of like, I don't know. It's like if your parents tell you can't eat McDonald's, you want McDonald's, right? So it was kind of that way of thinking. I needed the structure to have to do my studies, and I probably wouldn't have always enforced it if it was left upon my own self to enforce that. So in some way they were like magic rules or something like that, you know. So initially that was the case, but I think maybe 2 of my years I studied online, and then the rest of the following 2 years I had finished my degree and I just decided to continue for some time. However, what was one other really big benefit of working for the airline is that you got really great staff passes. So good staff discounts to be able to travel places. So I used to try and get as many days off. Like there was a system where you could try to request for certain days off. I would try to do that, and I would try and go away as much as possible on my days off. And then therefore, as soon as you're out of the country, you didn't have to abide by any of the rules. That's true. And
so like in a given month, how many days would you work roughly versus travel or be, like, what was the work-life balance?
So legally, I think they were supposed to give us 8 to 10 days off a month, just cool. Like any other real, probably normal job. But generally speaking, I think it would kind of work out more than that, because, for instance, you might fly to, let's say, Beijing, and then you'd get back from a Beijing flight at, say, 5 o'clock in the morning, and then you might not work until 4 days later. So say, for instance, that was on, say, a Tuesday, you'd have Wednesday and Thursday, all the rest of Tuesday off. Okay, you would sleep most of it, but then you'd have Wednesday, Thursday off, and then on Friday you might not actually work until, say, 1 o'clock. Well, it'd be Saturday morning at 1 o'clock, but you'd have to arrive at work at, say, 10:30 on a Friday night. So technically you'd kind of have like extra days off. So that was helpful. It was kind of a nice work-life balance. I appreciated it.
And so you were getting out of the Middle East, so like a decent amount. You'd be in Europe or other parts of the world.
Yes, exactly.
That must have been really interesting, hopping in and out of this world where you have these rules and you're kind of like living like swiping in and out to like you're visiting a friend in London and it's 3 a.m. and you're thinking, oh, I got to be home.
Well, it's funny because I have a lot of colleagues that we've talked about this since our days there, and all of us went through a transition period where even when we left the company, it was still like a thing that we'd constantly look at our watch, like just to check that we should be going home.
I feel this way a little bit with COVID now. You know, it's kind of become like within less than a year, it's become like really normal to like, I feel weird if I don't have the mask on, or I feel like we have a curfew here currently, you know, I'm like, well, we got to be home, you know, like I can imagine.
It does.
4 years.
It really becomes really ingrained in you. I don't know. I saw a meme the other day, and it's something that I've been doing when you watch TV shows at the moment. I don't know if you have this too, the same experience. But you're kind of looking around at people like, why don't you have your masks on?
Yeah.
And it's because it has
why are you hugging?
Exactly. Why did they just kiss in the street? You know, it's become so ingrained in me and so second nature that, that's just the way that and it shows us how adaptable we are as humans, you know?
Yeah.
So quickly we adapt to things. And so, it was the same when I left Qatar. I was always looking, 3 o'clock at my clock, or 2:30, you know, I have to get home. And there was a few different things, even when the next job that I had, when I transitioned to corporate aviation and I was being trained in that job, I remember my trainer saying to me, like, okay, so you've got to get your mobile out now, and you have to, you know, because we run you as an individual, you run that show, so you have to make sure that the catering's ordered and you've spoken to these people and these people organize this and the transport's sorted and maybe your hotel's organized, whatever it may be. So the company gives you a mobile phone to make sure that you can control all that. But it was really ingrained in me that I wasn't able to have my mobile in uniform. And corporate aviation, we wear a suit a lot of the time. So it's not even something that you can identify what company you work for, but it was just so ingrained in me that I shouldn't take out my mobile phone. So it does. There's things that you can be trained to do.
Interesting. Yeah. Wow. Okay. So Qatar, from Qatar, where'd you go?
Back to Australia for some time, just to stay with my parents and spend some time with them, and then kept applying for corporate aviation jobs until I was lucky enough to get one, and then went out to Riyadh in Saudi Arabia to be trained, and generally speaking, a lot of the companies, if you work for an actual company, the company that I got a job with was a charter company. So, for instance, just like, this is a very interesting way of describing it, but let's say, for instance, you hire an Uber. It's the same kind of thing. If you have enough money, you can go to a charter company and you can hire a private jet to fly you and your family or whoever is needed to fly to that destination. So I flew for a charter company, and the charter company, a lot of those companies don't have they're not big companies, so they don't have a big training department. So they often will send you to well-known companies to be able to have your training. So I was flown to a company in the States called Flight Safety to have my training, and then I continued, and our bases were in Riyadh and Jeddah, and I used to work a 1 month on 1 month off contract.
Okay.
And
were you pretty much working a full month, or was it like
that varied.
You're just on call?
You were on call, and we lived in hotels, and we would go between, I don't know. So we worked, more or less it was like 1 month on 1 month off. And in that 1 month, I don't know, we could have flown 4 days or we could have flown 25.
Yeah.
So it did vary. And that was not just within Saudi Arabia, that was all around the world.
All over. Mm-hmm. Super fun. Mm-hmm. And how was the experience living in Saudi Arabia as compared to Qatar?
Well, because it was a 1 month on 1 month off situation, it wasn't really, I mean, in Qatar I had an apartment given to me that I shared.
You felt less immersed in Saudi.
Exactly. I stayed in a hotel. It wasn't even like I could cook my own meals. And also there was not really any opportunities to meet other people in the region. I don't think I left Saudi, other than people that I met at the company. I don't think I left Saudi with knowing anybody there that I just met randomly. Yeah. We were always like, when we're at work. It was, you were switched on to work mode all the time, more or less. So, again, Saudi was even stricter than Qatar. So yes, I had to wear an abaya in Saudi, and always had to carry a headscarf. As a foreigner, you didn't have to wear a headscarf. But Saudi I don't think that this exists anymore, but at the time when I was there, they have a police that are a religious police called the Matawa. Mm-hmm. And if the Matawa catch you in the streets, they had the power in some way to ask you to put your headscarf on. Okay. So you always had to have your headscarf just in case you were
interesting. So it's like not illegal to wear it, right, to not wear it, but if these particular type of police ask you, you have to put it on.
Sure.
I remember actually my mom telling me stories long ago when she flew to Saudi from the U.S. on one of her routes regularly, and I don't remember the story exactly, but she told me something about wearing jeans had just come into fashion. Okay. And this is probably in like the 70s. Okay. And she's wearing jeans from the U.S. in Saudi, and like it was a big deal.
I could imagine how controversial that would have been at the time. Yeah, there was a girl that I worked with. We used to stay in this compounds, very common there. So foreigners, well, I mean, even Saudi people, but you know, it's a gated community, and a lot of things that aren't necessarily supposed to happen go on inside these gated communities.
Like what? Like I mean, are we talking like scandalous kind of things, or
no? I mean, you were obviously supposed to, as a female, you're supposed to wear your abaya all the time, for instance.
But maybe in the compound,
in the compound, depending on the compound.
Will you describe that too? Like, what is this abaya for anybody that doesn't know?
So. I'm not going to do this justice. I'm not going to sound very eloquent about this. So I apologize to anyone that's out there thinking, you haven't explained that correctly. But, you know, generally speaking, it's black in color, and it's a long black dress. Okay. Covers everything down to your ankles,
like shoulder, like neck to.
Exactly.
Everything below, okay.
Neck,
not the head,
and everything below, but not your head. And then you also have, the word escapes me right now. You also have the hijab. Yeah. So you would carry.
That's for your head.
Reference that before the headscarf. So I would always carry my headscarf. But in the compound, depending on what type of compound it was, there was foreigners that lived in compounds, and they would walk around just as per normal. Life would kind of continue behind those gated walls. if you were a foreigner living there, just as per normal, and people could go to the beach. One compound we stay at had a beach, and I remember a colleague was at the beach in a bikini because everybody else around her was, and that particular day there wasn't many people there. And this Matawa police somehow got into the compound.
Oh, no.
And it wasn't something that was supposed to happen, but somehow they did get in, and there was a warning light that would go off, you know.
If the Matawa were
coming? Or if
something.
If someone in particular, you know, if you should get indoors. And,
or put on a t-shirt.
Exactly. So she was caught off guard and started to get chased and was told, and she didn't have anything to cover up, and she was just distraught, this poor girl, and didn't really know what to do. And it can be really it can be really different to what you might be used to.
Yeah.
So but again, I have very good memories, and you just have to have your wits about you, and it's a great experience to have gone through.
What was the best part about living in Saudi? Like, was there anything that stood out to you as like something deep and rich about the culture, or like, or more so just the experience flying during that time and getting to see more of the world, and maybe for lack of a better phrase, getting out? I'm not sure. Yeah,
let's say it like that.
Yeah, let's just be honest.
I think exactly.
Nobody's listening. It's just me and you.
Like I said, it wasn't home because we lived in hotels. So I think there was a difference to Saudi. I didn't ever really feel like, you know, I was always going back to a hotel. It wasn't really like I was ingrained within, I didn't have a friendship circle. I think that can make a really big difference in a place like that. So maybe I would have seen it through different eyes had I had that experience. I don't have a huge desire to really ever go back there.
Yeah.
It might happen again for work purposes, and that will just be the way that it goes. There was nothing that really pulls me back there. The thing is too, Saudi has changed a lot since I was there a few years ago. Women can now drive. That happened just after I left. For instance, when I was living there was no movie theatres. There's no cinemas. There's no change rooms in malls. There's not a lot of external activities, things that we would be possibly used to that are of ease there, or at least that I wasn't introduced to. I didn't know that they existed. Now I've heard that changing rooms are possible in malls. So I would say actually my best memories about Saudi is the sales. The malls were great because that was where you'd go, and it's
shopping
really,
sprees.
Yeah, it's really hot a lot of the year. So, you know, the air conditioning in a mall was a good reprieve.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, there's not
Yeah.
a lot of interesting things for me to say about Saudi. I'm sorry.
No. I mean, I think it's interesting to get the perspective of living as an expat in Saudi at that time. I mean, it's like not something, I believe, as far as I know, you're the only person I know that has that experience. So that's why I think it's super interesting. And so anyway, we don't need to go like piece through piece of your resume here, but I think but I just think what people are most interested in that are listening to this is like, you know, types of jobs that can take them to foreign lands, how you can stay for a long time, visa stuff, finding work once you get to a place, you know, just basically making it like not the 5-week holiday,
right,
but the lifestyle that you want to live. And you've described a million different ways that somebody can do that in the last, you know, hour or whatever, however long we've been talking. So super interesting.
Thank you.
Yeah, really
I'm
really
really
love
happy to talk about it. I find the experiences of anyone, yourself included, and Alison and the other friends that we have here, it's just so interesting to talk about, you know, how people have, I completely agree. I think this podcast will be a huge hit because there is so many people out there that I'm sure want to do the same thing. And yeah, it's great to listen to different people's stories and where they've been and what they've done. Yeah,
I get a lot of inspiration from it. And when I talk to some people and say, "Oh, I would love to be doing what you're doing," I'm like, "Have you heard about Bree? She lived in Saudi Arabia." Like, what? So anyway, yeah, I think it's really fun, and hopefully people will take some inspiration from this. Is there any other part before we wrap up with this? Any other part of the Odyssey of Bree that you want to touch on or like share that we didn't get to?
No, not really. Maybe the only thing I can think of is that we mentioned at the start that my visa here in Spain is a non-lucrativa visa, the same as what you have. And so my transition from Saudi to Spain was just because my job was 1 month on, 1 month off at the time, and my 1 month off, the company would basically pay for my flight anywhere in the world. So I traveled a lot during those months off. You know, I did the Baltics, the Balkans, Mexico, and I did that for 2 years, and I lived out of a suitcase. And then I thought, I really need to live somewhere. This is so tiring.
It is exhausting, right? It's super fun. It looks cool on Instagram, but it's exhausting.
Exactly. So I loved it. I had such a ball, and it was more
And
or
in
less
Mexico, that must be where you learned your Spanish.
Yeah, it's going really well.
Again, by osmosis.
Exactly. Under my pillow, the book went. So yeah, I decided traveling home to Australia in some of those months off, and it was just too far to constantly be going back there. The jet lag was affecting me. So my sister lives in Barcelona, and I had traveled to Spain many times before, so I just decided, why not? I would like to finally learn Spanish, and a few years later I'm still on that journey. But why not? Let's go and try Spain. And it's just over 3.5 years, and I love it here. I really enjoy it. I hope Spain keeps giving me a visa. I've met some great people. I've had some great adventures, and I just can't wait for them to return. It's a great place to base yourself and travel Europe a bit more, or anywhere in Europe for that matter.
Yeah.
I suppose you have to choose what's the things that make you happiest. You know, I have an old boss of mine. She's also Australian. She chose to live in Chamonix because her and her husband love to ski. And she was doing the same job as what I've just talked about through this podcast, and that enabled them to go and live there, and that's fantastic. You know, I love the beach, I love being by the coast, I love hiking, and I love the weather here, so that's why I chose here. So I suppose you can just choose what suits you, and there's always ways to work it out.
Yeah. I think that's like an overriding message that I hope people get listening to the different episodes here is like, there's always a way to figure it out.
There's always ways to work it out.
You can make it happen. And I think we very often think like, it's not possible. Like that's not within my grasp. And it totally is. There are so many visas.
Really?
I remember when we first wanted to move to Europe, I like did tons of Google searches looking for ways for Americans to live in Europe. Right. And like everything was just like negative. No, it's not possible. No, there's like one visa in this one country.
Right.
But like you dig below that layer of crap and you get to like people who are sharing their stories and they're like, actually, if you just do this, you can do it. You know, you have to live here for 1 year, but then you can move wherever you want or whatever. There's just lots of different ways to make it work. And I think that's the story.
Completely correct. And these days, like I said to you before, when I first left, there wasn't as many opportunities for that, but I somehow made it work along the time. And now there's just so many opportunities. You can take so many things online. And I think COVID in a way we've had so many changes brought upon us from that, but you know, there may be a lot of companies that do go digitally, and that will give a lot of people opportunities. Or even if they don't go digitally full time, you know, they might be able to live for 6 months on and 6 months off in different countries. So I think that I just want to make sure that people know that there's so many opportunities and stay positive to it. Keep searching. Keep looking. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's good advice. Now I do have some good news and some bad news for you.
Oh, he told me he wouldn't surprise me.
The bad news is you told me not to hit you with any rapid fire questions at the end.
Do it.
And that gave me the idea to hit you with rapid fire questions. So we're going to do that.
On the spot.
But the good news is I am also on the spot because I have no plans for this. So I'm going to be totally shooting from the hip here, as we say in the South.
Okay.
And I don't know if that helps you or makes it worse, but let's just see where it goes.
Okay. I'm game. Let's go.
All right. I got to make something up real quick to get us started. And these are going to be super fast. So first thing that comes to your mind. Craziest thing you saw flying corporate?
Ooh, can't share secrets. That's like kissing and
telling. No. But you don't have to give any names or anything. Just very quickly, like.
Okay, can I tell you about a story that happened to one of my colleagues rather than me?
Sure.
So
one of her colleagues' quotations.
So there was a pickup truck that arrived outside. This was in Saudi, on outside of the jet on the tarmac, and there was a big, huge silver platter, like huge, like not even something that you would ever imagine is possible to hold food, and it was completely like covered in tin foil, aluminium foil. And so these guys started to bring it on the plane, and my friend was like, "Oh, wait, what are you doing? What is this thing?" And they were like, "Oh, it's for the passenger. It's a special thing that's been ordered." Anyway, it turned out it was a big camel that had been slow roasted, and it was like a celebration. It was a baby camel, but
a roasted camel,
like a roasted camel that was for a special occasion. So there was not even anywhere to stow that, you know.
Oh,
so yeah, it was served to the passengers for lunch, but. That was
Did she have to serve the camel?
Well, I don't think so. No. I think she just was able to remove the aluminium foil, and it was just like, voila, here you go, you know? Something like that.
Oh.
Yeah.
I'm going to stop with rapid fire right there. That is the perfect way to wrap up. We can't top that. Roasted camel served on a private jet while flying over Saudi. Let's end there before we go in a negative direction. We'll end on a high note. So, Bree, thank you so much. This was really fun for me personally. I just enjoyed chatting with you and learning more, and I have no doubt people will really enjoy the information that you shared. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Chase, for having me. Thank you for listening.
Thanks for tuning in today from wherever you are in the world. Once again, I'm Chase, and this has been another episode of About Abroad. You can visit aboutabroad.com to get our latest updates and listen to past episodes, or find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, really anywhere you get your podcasts. On that note, if you enjoyed the show, feel free to subscribe, and if inclined, leave a few stars and a review. It's truly, truly appreciated and will help more wanderers just like you find us. Until the next time, adios from España.